Alright guys, so I've been buffing little parts and thought I better turn the camera on here. So I've got all these little bitty parts and pieces that I've built, and this is actually a lower body mount cover for the car, and I've got stepped speed holes in it. I've even got some square nuts welded in it, and my brake lines are going to go through a metal clamp that's really nice looking, black anodized one, but it's a dual, and it'll hold the two brake lines along through there. And then I've got a hole drilled here for a it's like a Christmas tree style clip with a locking tab on it to hold the speedometer cable in place. So anyway, right now I've already wet sanded it, and I've already did number 1 compound. Now I'm on to number 2. So get back started here. I've already started on number 2, so I've gotten pretty far before I decided I better turn the camera on. So you're probably going to pick up the air leaking out of my fitting. My air hose fitting is getting pretty worn out. And the air compressor is probably going to kick on, so you're going to hear that. I don't think that thing was ever going to shut off. these little small handmade parts like this kind of suck, because when you go back to sand and polish them, anything that doesn't have a soft edge is very, very easy to get, you know, go through the paint with either the sandpaper or the buffer. But one of these, either the left one or the right one of those I went through trying to buff it, so I had to go back and sand it all down to redo it. I don't remember which one it was, but this is one of those things when you're trying to build a really nice car. Try to sand and buff as much of the parts as you can, because it makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference. With this car, I've sanded the door jambs, the dash, the firewall, the brake caliper covers I made at all four corners. Because, you know, when you're in a garage like I am, you're not going to get a nice paint job. I don't have a fancy paint booth, which I do now, but I bought one of them blow up paint booths, the inflatable. I haven't tried it yet. I kind of want to save it for my wife's 55, because I hate just to paint parts, few little pieces in that thing, and get, you know, spend the time putting it up and all that crap to make a mess in it with all the overspray, and then have to go back to clean it up and all that. So I'd rather just save it for a one and done on my wife's car. Oh man. What I did on these this time is I stayed off of the edges with the sandpaper. I just sanded kind of almost close to all the corners and edges, and just tried to focus on the flat areas. And that might have been what I needed to do, because nothing sucks more than having to get a part all painted and then go in to sand and buff it, and you go through. That's the days that you throw things out in the yard. I can tell you, if you've never buffed a car, it is a little intimidating. And I can give you a little word of advice. Not that I'm the best there is, I'm just telling you from what I have learned. When you go to buff a car, you've got to do it in stages with different grits of compound. And like I use 3M, it has number 1, number 2, and number 3 on it. So you know which ones to use. You go down through the grades. You do not use the same buffing pads for each compound. You have a buffing pad for each compound, so you don't cross-contaminate. When you do your number 1 compound, when you're either buffing a car, a hood, or no matter what it is, if you shine a light on it or put this where the light's coming down in it, if you see a dull or a hazy spot, you need to keep going on it with number 1, because it won't come out with number 2 and 3. And I can tell you another thing, I do not buff other people's paint jobs. That is asking for trouble. You don't know how much paint that person put on there. So you're taking a huge gamble right there doing that. Like I did 2 heavy coats on my gas door, and I went to sand it to buff it, and it actually sanded okay, but when I got to buffing it, I went through on the very corner edge. So I got it all sanded down, and I get to repaint it again. How awesome. Not. But this time I'll try to put at least 3 coats on it, if not 4. It just kind of depends. I'm just going to do these parts by hand with the number 3 instead of doing the buffer. I can tell you, when you build a car, and you do this kind of level of detail on each individual component, when you put it together, it'll be a work of art in the end. It's going to be an all-day process I've spent on just a few components today, these little small parts, but it's pretty rewarding when you put the number 3 on like I'm doing right now, and it gets that awesome shine in it. That number 3 is, they look good. The parts or the cars look good in number 2 by the time you put that on there and buff them out and stuff. And when you put the number 3 on there, that's the wow factor. It really puts the depth in that paint at that point. I don't enjoy buffing too much. I can tell you though, I'm old school. I've always used just a regular buffer. And then when I was doing this car, I went down to Harbor Freight and I bought a Bauer orbital polisher. It was like $100 or a little over $100. I don't remember. They have a couple of different ones. They have one that's a little bit cheaper, but I got the $100 one. I can't remember what the difference is. It might have been adjustable speed or something, I don't remember, but I can tell you that if you are bad at getting swirl marks and holograms in paint with a regular buffer, that orbital polisher will be your best friend. You can really stay on the paint a little bit longer too and work on it with that orbital polisher. It's a lot more forgiving than just an orbital buffer, but circular buffer. That orbital polisher really makes it look good. I'm happy with mine. I remember when them orbital polishers came out, they were super expensive. I think that was before Harbor Freight started selling their brand of them, but I never did buy one. I just kept using a regular buffer, but I would always have to go back after I did number 1 on a car. It'd have swirl marks in it and holograms, and I would take a microfiber applicator pad like this that you can buy a big thing of them, and I would put number 1 on it pretty heavy, and then I'd go back, like say on the quarter panel, I'd go back and just wipe it one direction end to end like this, because straight lines, compound lines, are harder to see than this. And then I would wash everything down, then I'd go back with number 2 on the buffer, and then I'd get another new applicator pad, put number 2 on it, and go one direction. So it took days for me to buff a car, but that was the only way I could get rid of my swirl marks. And once you get an orbital polisher, you don't have to do all that labor anymore, which is really nice. Pretty amazing stuff, really, for when you're used to doing old school stuff like that, like I am. I tend to do things the way I was taught, unless I come up with a better way, but the only way you're going to get experiences in something is to do it, and do a lot of it. When something screws up and you go through, you just chalk it up as practice and try again. Oh yeah, that's sweet, man. Okay. So that is a body mount cover. This is going to be the one for the driver's side. Oh, so now these can be, actually that's not true, I was going to say I can go ahead and put these on, but I can't. I have to actually glue some rubber welting around this. So that's going to have to set up overnight, so I guess I'll go ahead and get that going, but man, I'm happy with that. That looks awesome. I do have a scratch right here. I'm going to go back over that and do that again. I'll have to hit that, probably number 1. Might have been something in one of my old rags here. When I do buffing, I usually get some big Ziplocs and I'll write on there, like this says 3M number 3. So these are my rags and stuff that I use specifically for each one. And that way it kind of keeps them from getting contaminated from dust and dirt. But anyway, just my redneck way of doing stuff. So I'm going to go back in and try to rework that scratch so it goes away, but I'm pretty happy with that. And I didn't go through the paint anywhere, so, well, not yet, but I probably will when I do it again, you know what? Alright guys, I'm going to show you where this goes. This is all made out of some pretty thick sheet metal, and then I've got pipe caps, and I hole sawed it and then put the pipe caps in flush and then welded it and then ground it. I've got it notched out here for the factory bracket that bolts on here for your inner fender, and I left a lot of space on it because that is an adjustable component, so I had to have a lot of room for that to adjust, and that's why there's an oval hole here, so that makes for good adjustment. But your body mount here, normally they come way up here, but I've cut the top off. But this lower, it's real ugly to look at, so this will actually slide in there like this, down over that, and then it'll bolt on. And then I've got some double bolt-on clamps here for the 2 brake lines to hold them together, and then I've got my speedometer cable here that'll go to this one. So it'll look nice and professional, it'll be firmly mounted. And then if I ever need to take the car back off the frame, I can just unbolt these and unbolt that stuff and then get to the body mount cover. If you don't want to go through this kind of work and just cap everything off, you can weld a cage nut in here with its cage on it, weld that in there, and then put your bolt up from the bottom, if you wanted to. It's kind of what I wish I had done now instead of making all these intricate parts, but I always tend to do things the hard way. Thanks for watching.